Keith Smith covers the NBA, Yahoo Sports. Going to join us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as a lot of interesting stuff happening in the NBA. We're 1 month away from the NBA trade deadline. I feel like, Broads, even though the trade deadline's a month away, because the season started late and we're into February, that we're hearing more about trades and buyouts and all that kind of stuff. You?
Yeah, I think so. And I was thinking maybe it has to do with the shortened season, but it's only shortened by 10 games. It's not like it was insanely shortened. So, yeah, I agree with you. It does seem like it's just kind of really getting heavily discussed there.
Well, we'll get into that and some more. Keith Smith is going to join us now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as this NBA season is about to hit the halfway point, Keith. And I know last night a lot of people tweeting away about the Celtics and what's happening with them. But first, before we get to that situation, I want to get your take on how well a Kyle Lowry trade would fit for the Philadelphia 76ers. It was reported today by Keith Pompey. We had him on earlier. He's reporting that Lowry would like to come back to Philly. He obviously has roots there. He played at Villanova, and that's a spot that he said that, yes, he would like to come back to. So what does a Lowry deal do for Philly if they were able to make that deal?
I think it could be one of those moves that takes them from being a, let's call it a pseudo-contender, a team that's in the mix, to being maybe the favorite in the Eastern Conference, depending on what they give up to get him. And that's the bigger part of it. Lowry's around $30 million. To get to that number, you're going to have to give up quite a lot of stuff to match salary on that. And that makes it tricky, because that means you're sending out probably somewhere between 2 and 4 key rotation guys if you're Philadelphia. And that starts to get a little bit rich. It's almost like the same conversation with the James Harden trade talks earlier this year.
Yeah, I know you just hit on something that if they were to get Lowry, they would have to send a minimum of 4 pieces out the door, maybe even 5, just to make the salaries match. So I guess the question would be, is getting Lowry worth it if it's going to make you have to give away 4 or 5 pieces? Not that they're these great pieces, but like a Matisse Thybulle would probably be included, or a Maxey, or a Shake Milton.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really hard. And if it was just those guys, that wouldn't be so bad. But it's the bigger salaries where it gets a little harder. Are you moving on from Ben Simmons? Are you going to trade a Danny Green in a deal like this? How is this coming together? Or are you going the route of, hey, Toronto, here's 7 guys for 1, and those things almost never happen in the regular season because they're virtually impossible because of the roster size just isn't there. And this is one year where I think most teams are going to be really conscientious of making sure that they have enough depth. Even if teams feel, hey, we're past the worst of the COVID situation, there are still a lot of basketball games getting crammed in to the final stretch here. I want to say most teams are going to play between 35 and 40 games in about 68 days in the season's second half. And that's, you need depth to get through that. So I think you're going to see a lot of them be very leery of trading away multiple players for 1, unless they really feel that guy's lifting them to the title.
How much easier of a decision is it for the Sixers if they can find a way to keep him after the expiring contract ends? He's 34, will be 35, from Philly, chance to win here. If this is more than just a half of the season push and you can bring him back, would that make it easier for you?
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier. I think you almost have to have at least a, really good feeling, you're 75, 80% that he's going to return after this one season, because you can't go down the road of trading for a guy and then watching him turn around and leave again after you gave up a whole lot to get him. That just becomes something that becomes really hard. And then you're stuck sitting there with no cap space and very little ability to refresh out your team the following off season. You would trade that if that gets you 1 title, right? I think most teams would do that. That was what the Raptors did a couple years ago. But it does become a challenge to make that kind of trade unless you're really certain you've got a great chance at retaining the player.
Yeah, and I know that the one interesting thing is the Sixers have probably definitively a defensive advantage over Brooklyn right now. But if you give away some of these pieces like Matisse Thybulle, maybe if he's in there, Danny Green, not that he's playing great defense, you're weakening your defense. does Lowry give you enough firepower to kind of outscore the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, that's tricky because for all that, Kyle Lowry's a pretty good offensive player. I'm not sure how much he lifts the offense to versus what would be offset with the defense, because the challenge really becomes on the defensive side. You will have given up so much versatility in a deal like this. And what you really need against the Nets, which I think gives Philadelphia a good chance, is you already have a massive advantage at the 5 because Embiid is better than anybody Brooklyn is ever going to throw out at the 5. But what you really need is a whole bunch of different guys, 4 or 5 different guys, which they have, that you can throw at Durant, Irving, and Harden. And Philadelphia has that right now. They're one of the very few teams that does. You're not going to stop them, but I think your better opportunity is, all right, if we can slow them down when we get into a playoff series, which I think you're kind of maybe starting to look ahead to just a little bit, and that's okay, that's how we got to think about this thing is how do we match up with them on that end of the floor, because it's going to be hard to outscore them with just adding, a guy like Kyle Lowry.
The last couple of games against Toronto really made it tough for Joel Embiid. Is there now a blueprint out because of Nick Nurse? I just feel so many teams try and double Joel. So many teams try and bring so many different looks to him, but it never works to the efficient rate that Nick Nurse has it. What do you see in that matchup that gives Joel so much trouble compared to other teams?
Yeah, it's weird. I always think about it. I go back to, I don't know if you guys remember, but they asked Shaquille O'Neal who the guy who gave him the most trouble was, and he always talked about Bryant Big Country Reeves back in the day. Now, that should have been one of those things, excuse me, where you look at it and think, wow, that should be a mismatch, and it just wasn't. And Aaron Baines, for whatever reason, gives Joel Embiid some problems. So between Nick Nurse throwing kind of all of his funky, gimmicky defenses where he goes zones and then he'll play zone off ball, but 2 on the ball and all sorts of different things. And then Baines, that's why I think Embiid has a little bit of trouble, because it almost can vary trip to trip what kind of look they're throwing at him. And I think that's why they do a little bit better against him than a lot of other teams.
Keith Smith, Yahoo Sports, covers the NBA. Let's look at the East, where right now, Keith, the Boston Celtics would be out of the playoffs if they started today. What is happening up there? You're very close to that situation. And, I mean, is this just funky play? They just haven't played all that well? Or is there something else that is causing the Celtics, who have lost 3 in a row, 7 out of 10, and now they're out of the playoffs?
Well, I think it's clear they just want to be in on the play-in action in the first full play-in tournament. They definitely want to be a part of that. That's it. But no, in reality, it's a mess. The only thing that the Celtics do well now is defend the 3-point line. Everything else they are average or below average at, and that is made it really hard on them. Their offense is very reliant on isolation, and they're very reliant on Tatum and Brown to create everything. Kemba Walker is only playing about 2 out of every 3 games because he's always out on one half of the back-to-back. That has been a major struggle. So they are just really not in a place where they're doing a whole lot of things well. Defensively, they're having all sorts of issues because they're so reliant on young players. I think it's 51% of their minutes are played by players who are 24 and under. Which is, that's kind of absurd at this point in the NBA for a team that styles themselves as a good team. So all of their guys that are coming off the bench are in their first, second, or third year. That's really hard. So I lay this on a roster construction issue. They held on to every draft pick that they had for the most part, minus a couple they moved to move some salary around. And that's now kind of coming home to roost, because what you have is a roster that is just, although it seems like the young guys have had a lot of experience, that's really Tatum and Brown. The rest of these young guys, they're figuring out on the fly, and we know young teams generally do not do a lot their first or second time through.
Yeah, I want to ask you, because I saw some people last night saying Brad Stevens should be on the hot seat and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. Now, funny, to hear that here, where we heard about Brett Brown all these years, that he's terrible, he's got to go, and that Brad Stevens is this and that. And to hear that he would be, is that something that would even be considered with the way this team and this season is going right now?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Danny Ainge came out today and squarely put the blame on him and the players. He took the vast majority of the blame on himself for the way the team is built. And then for the players, he put someone that they don't seem to be bringing a consistent effort night to night. So that is, interesting. And then Wick Grossbeck, their managing partner, managing owner, governor, whatever we want to call it today, he said that Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge aren't going anywhere. And there's never been a discussion. That's not even on the table. The other thing with Stevens is he just signed another contract extension right before the bubble started. So I think what we're looking at there is that's, one of those things we all know ownership groups are really loath to pay somebody to not coach for them. And right now, where the pandemic has hurt a lot of the pocketbooks, I'd be surprised if you're going to see anybody fire a coach with a lot of years remaining on a contract.
When Kyrie was there, it was obviously a mess, and they tried to replace that with Kemba Walker. How would you analyze the Kemba Walker experience in Boston?
It was great up until when he got hurt about a little more than a year ago. He was fitting in really well. He was playing really well. He was kind of giving them the ideal guard you did with the two young wings. He was able to play off the ball. He was able to do some stuff. And and this continues all the way till today. He wants to be there and came to work with a smile on his face every single day. And that really does make a difference for teams. Now, the challenge is he got hurt and he hasn't been the same player. He's not as quick. He doesn't have the same kind of burst. Because his minutes and games played are inconsistent right now, he's struggling to get in a rhythm. He'll have a good game, and then he sits out a game, and then he doesn't look so good the next time around. So if the hope is with time, he gets back to normal. He's only been back a little over a month. So I think we got to give it a little bit more time. But if he doesn't get back to normal, all of a sudden Boston went from a team that looked pretty good to having a major albatross sitting there on the cap sheet that's going to be difficult to work around for a couple more years.
Keith Smith covers the NBA. The Sixers will play the Mavericks tonight. They are 15-15. 1-2 in a row here, but what's going on with Dallas? I think a lot of people thought they would be maybe a contender in the Western Conference.
Yeah, a couple of things. One kind of off the court thing. They had a lot of injuries, and they went through a COVID issue that hit. They were without four key rotation players, including a guy you're very familiar with there, and Josh Richardson was out for a while. And that was just as they had started to play kind of good, and they had gotten Kristaps Porzingis back, and they were really working everybody together. That hit them. The on-court thing that they're going through is their defense stinks. They don't defend well at any of the three levels. They're really having a hard time getting stops. They've had a hard time, controlling the ball in games, and that's been a problem. That part of that is it's hard to build a defense around Luka Doncic because he has to be kind of your primary ball handler, and that can be difficult to get that guy who can really defend ball handlers on the floor. So that's something I think they were hoping Richardson could do. But as we all know, that was what Philly wanted him to do too, and that never really worked out either. So I think you're seeing the Mavs. They're going to scuffle. They'll probably get into the play-in, and then we'll see where they go. They'll be dangerous in a playoff series because Luka could win a playoff game or two all by himself almost. But I think you're looking at a team that's going to go through a pretty big overhaul this offseason as they try to rebalance around their young star.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot with this question, and it's not like some hot take type question, but do you have any thoughts or names of some buyout options who could be on the horizon here?
Yeah, none of them should be overly exciting to people, and I think we make a lot out of the buyouts, and rarely do those guys have a very big impact in leading a team to much success in the postseason. But I think Andre Drummond, we're staring that right down the barrel here. Cavs have not been able to find a trade for him. I don't know that they're going to find a trade because he's an expiring deal. It's highly likely he'll take a buyout, and then he'll join one of the contenders. Blake Griffin, I don't think anything's going to happen with him. There's just too much money owed to him. And then after that, you're looking at guys who I don't think anybody's going to get too psyched about. Maybe from the Sacramento Kings, a Jabari Parker or Nemanja Bjelica. You could have somebody from the Thunder, like a George Hill, who could help teams. But none of these guys, I think, are coming in. They're going to be guys you're going to trust to swing a playoff series.
All right, Keith Smith, the NBA continues on. And by the way, the first half will end, and then the second half will start just in the beginning of March, and we're going all the way till the playoffs, which begin on May 22nd. The second half will end on May 16th. The playoffs will tip May 22nd. So Keith wasn't lying. You're playing about 35 to 40 games in about a 65-day period here. It is going to be a rush to the end. They want to get these playoffs going. May 22nd is when they're going to tip these playoffs off. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And don't forget, Keith's got a little one-on-one coming up with Jason Tatum. So follow him at Keith Smith NBA to check that out. I think that, drops tomorrow?
Yeah, hopefully that'll be up tomorrow morning. You guys know the world of transcription quite well. Takes a little while to make sure you're not misquoting anybody.
All right, so check that out at Keith Smith NBA, his one-on-one conversation with Jason Tatum. All right, Keith, appreciate it as always, pal.
I thank you guys. I appreciate it. Y'all stay safe, you and yours.
All right, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.